The CIA's final remote view, the psychic map to Earth's extinction. The word circled on the final page wasn't save. It was Cull. By the time the analysts saw it, the map was already on the table. Coastlines withdrawn like a breath, inland lines thickened into corridors, and a column titled Acceptable Survivability Floor. A CIA remote viewer had traced a near-future extinction scenario, and someone decided it wasn't a vision, it was a plan. Here's what we can point to without flinching: a declassified session summary with a date that lines up with a sudden wobble in magnetic models, and routing slips that pushed a sketch into policy talk. Meanwhile, deep sights were tuned, rail trunks hardened, manifests drafted with names you'll never see. Who makes the cut? Who gets locked out? The criteria read like math, but the math lands on people. And the word that turned a warning into doctrine, Cull, didn't start as policy. To see how it became one, we need to go back to the program's last months, when a routine tasking order went sideways. The contamination, how a vision became a plan. Stargate carried a simple label: explore anomalous cognition to support intelligence work. Officially, it was contested but occasionally useful. That was the line: keep it in the toolbox when you're blind, then put it away. In practice, operators lived in a gray zone. If a viewer sketched a thing that later showed up on a satellite image, nobody argued method. They sent the truck. In those final months, the tasking read like background noise. Industrial sites, personnel checks, a missing crate. Buried halfway down was a redirect. Characterized geomagnetic anomaly mapping. Operational relevance undetermined. It looked like a science deeder. It wasn't. It landed on the desk of a viewer with a reliability score people respected. Consistent Q discipline. A handful of operational hits that forced skeptical analysts to write retain pending. They'd worked simple before: describe a room, sketch a shipyard crane, call out water, stone, lattice. This queue went wide. The first minutes were messy, swirls, pressure, a recurring sense of tilt. The transcript shows the viewer anchoring. Find the map. Then the graphite settled into lines, coasts drawn not as they are, but as if the sea had stepped forward 2, maybe 3 lines inland. The hand tightened around elevated ridges like vertebrae. Corridors appeared, narrow strands through the interior labeled survivability corridors. In the margins, exclusion zones, with hash marks over major coastal cities and low-lying deltas. A few inland basins got crosshatched too. The word flow repeated. Then a pause, a heavy underline, and next to a parenthetical, herd movement, the single word: Cull. On first read, the analysts did what good analysts do: split raw from interpretation. They flagged corridor and exclusion as hypothesis. They wrote the caveat: viewer bias likely, disaster schema contamination, geophysics outside training. They tagged it low confidence and moved on. Except 2 things happened fast. First, the chain of custody. The session ID got routed to a unit that red flags anything low probability / high impact. The routing slip carries retain pending, bureaucratic for don't toss this, because if it's right and we ignored it, we're toast. Second, a separate contractor tasked a second viewer blind. Their map rhymed: inland corridors aligned with rail trunks, a bias toward deep rock, a note about non-coastal hubs, triage imperative. The overlays weren't perfect, but they were uncomfortable. Meanwhile, the viewer's reliability record kept the file from the shredder. They'd sketched a Middle East warehouse layout close enough to cue a search. They'd called out a communications relay in southern Europe that later matched a photo. Even skeptics wrote, operationally useful if triangulated. That phrase kept the door open. How did graphite lines start to bleed into planning? Not with a trumpet, through annotations. An analyst's margin scribble, a line with rail grid, deep rock, non-coastal hubs. Not orders, just breadcrumbs that made sense if you were hedging against storms, grid failures, evacuation choke points. A senior reviewed the packet and added 1 line to the cover memo. Scenario set Delta 3, maintain in black book. Once a thing gets a scenario label, it gets a seat in tabletop drills. Pushback came. A science advisor wrote the expected critique. Remote viewing sits outside replicable science. Geomagnetic excursions are debated. Conflating inundation with pole behavior is irresponsible. He ended with treat as heuristic, not doctrine. That should have been the end. But outside the file, something else was moving. Magnetic North Sprint forced an early world magnetic model update in 2019, and refined parameters arrived again with WMM 2025. Insurance maps repainted coastal risk. Logistics planners, independent of any psychic sketch, were shifting warehousing inland. None of that proved the map. It eroded resistance. If reality is moving, you look for models. Delta 3, flawed as it was, looked like a model. Inside the office, language began to harden. A risk officer wrote, "acceptable survivability floor" in a draft, shorthand for "if we can't save 100%, what baseline do we plan for?" The phrase stuck. Another analyst changed "exclusion zones" to "flow denial," the euphemism you use when you want to brief without setting off alarms. The viewer sensed the shift. Clinical notes later released mention migraines after the session, a nosebleed, and a recurring dream. Children at a sealed gate, the sound of locks. They asked for the transcript to carry a disclaimer. Cull was meant as a natural process warning. Predators trim the herd, now a caution, not instruction. Bureaucracy likes clarity more than caveat. Cull traveled with the packet. This was the contamination point, the moment of vision intended as heuristic bled into architecture. A map layer meant to provoke questions started to feel like an answer. And because the stakes felt existential, the normal immune system, peer review, replication, external critique, lost ground to a faster reflex. Hedge now, justify later. Meanwhile, across the hall, the file wasn't just being read. It was being routed to people who pour concrete. The folder's craft stock didn't look special. The stamps did. Eyes only. Limit distro. A sealed envelope labeled mirror set held the second map. A junior analyst digitized both, overlaid paleomagnetic sensitivity layers, storm surge corridors, and rail adjacency. They wrote the caution in the margin. Correlation is not equal to causation, then underlined 3 places where the shapes rhyme. Beside it, rail adjacency, deep rock, non-coastal hubs. The next slip moved it to continuity planners, the Mount Weather crowd, the Raven Rock lineage. Their pencil note, map layer flagged rail adjacency, and under it, procurement codes for seed lines, hardened comms, long shelf life meds. That's not theory. That's logistics. So a contested sketch gained a scenario tag, a gate list, and a budget lane. Nobody declared it true. They declared it too costly to ignore. That's how a vision became a plan. The file they sealed, session IDs, chain of custody, and the map. The folder looked ordinary, craft stock, string tie, but the spine told a different story. A clean session ID, date, viewer code, monitor initials. The date matters because it syncs with a documented drift spike that forced an early world magnetic model correction in 2019 and a parameter rethink leading into WMM 2025. That's not proof, just a drumbeat. Inside, the transcript carries the graphite map, messy pressure marks, erasures ghosting under fresh lines, and the word that wouldn't sit still. Cull. The routing slip is the breadcrumb trail. First stop, the low probability / high impact unit, the people who babysit nightmares. Retain pending is typed once and circled. A hand adds Delta 3 candidate, hold. Along the edge, in cramped pencil, cross-check paleo shift overlays. That pushes the packet to an analyst with Noah time series taped to their wall, the kind who speaks in error bars. They don't bless anything. They overlay. This is where a sketch becomes a layer. The graphite coastlines and ridges are scanned, georectified, then laid under archived storm surge models, subsidence maps, and paleomagnetic sensitivity zones. A warning goes in the margin. Correlation is not equal to causation. But 3 alignments sit stubborn. Interior ridges that match hard rock spines, corridors that rhyme with inland rail trunks, and junctions where non-coastal hubs already exist. The analyst writes tags, not orders. Rail adjacency, deep rock, non-coastal hubs. Chain of custody tightens. The second routing slip names custodians, records officer, program manager, legal liaison. Each adds a date and a shorthand. Contested, one writes. LPHI retain, says another. Legal adds, policy exposure, limit distro. The stamp, eyes only, lands on the final page with a list of 5. That list includes an office that doesn't theorize, it procures. Then the envelope that changes the temperature. Sealed. Inserted later. Labeled mirror set. Inside, a second independent session summary from a different contractor, task blind. The geometry isn't identical, but the rhyme is ugly. Inland arteries, dead zones along low-lying coasts, and a bias to hardened interior nodes. The analyst bracketing overlaps writes, independent convergence, with a heavy question mark. 2 contested sketches now point the same way. An internal email summary circulates, 3 paragraphs for hedges. Contested source, it begins. Low probability / high impact scenario set, retain pending. The last line is the tell. Recommend placeholder within continuity drill architecture until indicators clarify. That's how a layer gets a seat without a vote. Once it sits, rooms rearrange. Continuity planners get it next, people with mount. Weather and Raven Rock in their institutional memory. Their pencil note, map layer flagged, rail adjacency. Under it, procurement codes that mean pallets move, long shelf life meds, seed lines, EMP hardened comms. You won't find a headline. You'll find a truck schedule. Archive mechanics kick in. The packet gets a shelf code, a reevaluation date 5 years out, and a pencil ad, black book, active. Legal routes a memo about policy exposure and insists on sunsets for any activation touching movement. The operational reply is a compromise. Heuristic adopted as model layer, gated by thresholds. Gates tied to orthodox indicators. An early WMM update. Insurance withdrawal indices shifting inland. Infrastructure stress alerts in coastal load centers. 2 of 3 must cross before escalation. It reads cautious, and it keeps the layer alive. A junior tries to break the spell. They build a transparency aligning the sketch's corridors with real-world upgrades. Rail sidings extended at inland choke points. Inland port renovations with storm-rated roofs. Fiber trunk redundancy along ridgebacks. They write correlation pressure in the margin. The human habit of trusting a line more when concrete appears nearby. The science advisor writes the sentence planners hate. Treat RV-derived layers as heuristic, not evidence. The interpreter echoes it on the cover. Heuristic input, operational model only. The list of custodians grows methodically. A records officer logs access. A program manager checks LIMDs. A legal liaison writes no public lanes. A continuity director adds a sticky note with 3 letters and a number. D3. That's the quiet promotion. Delta 3 shows up on tabletop agendas and scenario catalogs, in drill injects labeled geophysical stress. Broad enough to mean storm, grid, or space weather. Meanwhile, the file accretes small tells. A health system orders badge printers that can encode triage and movement permissions. A rail operator buys handheld scanners keyed to mission fit. A county warehouse installs turnstiles that default closed if power drops. None of these cite a map. All of them sit along its bones. The descent lane doesn't die, it gets boxed. A memo restates the boundary. Heuristics set questions. Evidence sets thresholds. Ethics set limits. The reply acknowledges it, then adds operational gravity. Thresholds met trigger drills only. No flow denial actions under provisional. It holds for a quarter. Language drifts. Flow smoothing appears beside gate discipline. The interpreter writes in the margin, release at pinch, default to expand. It sticks in one region's playbook and vanishes in the national draft. The chain ends, for now, with a name we can place on other Black Swan protocols. They sign the archive card and write one more lever on the wall. If WMM early update repeats or coastal insurance retreat accelerates, elevate to policy lane. Not a prophecy, a condition. If the world tugs the lever, the folder moves. That's the sealed file's secret. It isn't a verdict. It's a readiness. A graphite layer became a layer in budgets, drills, and doors. Not because anyone proved a vision, because enough of it rhymed with a country already walking uphill. Macro versus micro, the paradox takes shape. From the balcony, the plan sounds clean. Preserve a viable human seed through turbulence. Keep knowledge intact, bodies healthy, governance coherent enough to restart. Corridors on a map, hardened nodes, prepositioned supplies, hedges, not choices. Drop to street level, and every corridor line cuts someone out. That's the paradox. Macro survival on paper becomes micro exclusion at the gate. You see it first in closed drills, not the ribbon ones. The clock starts. Egress latency becomes a number. If a coastal node can't clear within set minutes, the scenario toggles from rescue to flow denial. The phrase is sterile until a logistics lead murmurs. We don't have the buses. In that sentence, the moral math starts. To save the most, plan for less than all. Sealed lists sharpen the edge. Mission essential, continuity cadre, critical skills. The nouns are bloodless. Grid ops, potable systems, trauma level, cryoseed stewardship, comms backbone. Yet the pattern stings. The further you live from a mapped axis, the less likely your name lands on a manifest. Inland facilities run HR audits. Fitness baselines, immunizations, shift endurance, confined space tolerance. A contractor gets a wink. Congrats, you're corridor compatible. The laugh dries fast. Outside the fence, procurement makes ethics real. Long shelf life meds vanish into depots sited where the viewer's pencil went dark. EMP-hardened radios show up in county sheds that never drew federal attention. An inland rail junction gets an easement for resilience upgrades and a nudge to rezone for population flow. The planner asks, from where? The memo stays quiet. Correlation pressure keeps pushing. Magnetic North Sprint forced an early WMM. Update in 2019 and Fed WMM 2025. Insurers retreat from coasts. Heat and surge seasons cut deeper. None of that proves a corridor. It rationalizes one. If the ocean is already pushing in and premiums are already fleeing, a spine feels prudent. Repeat prudent often enough, and it becomes permission. Here's how the but/therefore logic writes itself in rooms like these. We want to avoid panic, but choke points are inevitable. Therefore we design gates that can harden. We want to minimize harm, but stampedes kill faster. Therefore we authorize area denial framed as safety. We want doctrine humane, but indicators might trip early. Therefore we keep language soft so we can move hard. Every therefore carries moral injury forward like interest on a debt. Microstories fill the air gaps. A maintenance tech at an inland port swears the new concrete is overkill, mesh dense enough for a missile site. A nurse gets a triage module with an addendum. Non-transport candidates, comfort protocol. A dispatcher complains of resonance tests on inland rail that align a little too neatly with the sketched corridors. Nothing illegal. Everything aligned. Inside, dissent phrase doesn't vanish. A policy lawyer demands sunset clauses on any geophysical authority touching movement. Draft soften dates. Review at 90 days. A science advisor keeps the line. Remote viewing is contested. Treat map layers as heuristic. The interpreter gates activation to orthodox indicators, WMM adjustments, insurance withdrawal indices, infrastructure stress alerts, and adds. No flow denial under provisional. It buys time. Language still drifts. Flow smoothing sits beside gate discipline, and the latter keeps better friends. The paradox crystallizes in the scoring engine. Mission continuity profiles rank skills that keep nodes alive: grid, water, trauma, dispatch. Cross-trainability climbs. Health baselines sneak in: endurance, medication dependence, heat tolerance. It isn't framed as purity, it's downtime math. Then come the soft screens: startle response, decision speed and noise, sleep debt resilience. The algorithm optimizes throughput. It also prunes people. Someone calls it quiet eugenics pressure. The rebuttal says it's trio. Both are watching the same columns. Historical echoes don't help. Lifeboat ethics live here. How many seats before the hull dips, whose weight steps off? Wartime triage whispers: immediate, delayed, expectant. In hospitals, expectant means comfort when resources can't save. In corridors, expectant becomes a gate rule that never says its name. A medic argues pretending keeps you human long enough to find another bus. A planner points at the clock. There's a fix on the table the algorithm hates first and learns to like: decentralize. Instead of a few thick spines, build distributed micro-shelters, schools, churches, clinics with water, ventilation, battery banks, trading control for access. Early runs look messy: leakage, gaming, crowd noise. Second pass priors show survival diversity up, panic decay faster, medium-term recovery stronger. Command loses clarity, neighborhoods gain agency. The spreadsheet calls it noisy. Biology calls it resilient. Reframe the optimization target. Shift from throughput purity to survival diversity. Score neighbor effects: who stabilizes a block, who teaches, who stitches skills, alongside critical tasks. Replace floor with ladder. Criteria that widen under stress and publish a path to entry. Force every lock to carry a timer, a reason, and a reopen trigger. Measure leaders on releases made safely, not just assets preserved. Public vocabulary has to split less. Outside, resilience. Inside, egress suppression and manifest integrity. Collapse them. Post criteria now. Publish thresholds and sunset clocks. Require after-action numbers on denied flow and reopened gates. Ask the hardware question out loud at procurement. Are these gates designed to open first? The planet will keep doing what it does. Poles wander, models update every 5 years, storms stack. Those facts justify hardened comms, spare transformers, paper navigation. They don't justify deciding who gets water. Heuristics set questions. Evidence sets thresholds. Ethics set limits. The macro plan only earns its name if the micro choices stay human at the fence. And if independent systems are already drifting into alignment, the urgency is to set humane defaults now, not after the hardware learns to hold. The build-out, dugs, corridors, and logistics that shouldn't exist. While the memos argued verbs, excavators answered with bedrock. Old continuity sites, Mount Weather in Virginia, Raven Rock along the Maryland-Pennsylvania line, took on projects that don't happen without justification. Not press tours, procurement with teeth. Ventilation retrofits specified for overpressure and smoke scrubbing. Power rooms doubled with diesel bays and battery strings separated by blast curtains. Environmental filings list rock stabilization and drainage improvements, then show bore patterns that mirror interior ridges the sketch hugged. Across the federal arc, county boards got quiet visits about access improvements to legacy facilities. Asphalt appears, culverts drop, signage stays temporary. A retired electrician says he pulled cable for a switch room labeled AJCC Shadow, the kind of alternate linkage that keeps command alive if the primary goes dark. He keeps his non-disclosure. He tells his brother, second spines live. Rails paint the clearest rhyme. Sidings lengthen at inland choke points, not seaports. Ballast gets swapped for heavier aggregate. Welded rail installs on lines ignored for decades. Dispatchers grumble about slow orders for resonance tests on segments that happen to trace the corridor axis. Union reps call it safety overkill. Test cars roll at night with accelerometers strapped to frames. An engineer taps the graph and says, they're qualifying this for loads that don't stop. Insurance underwriters, telecom planners, and rail schedulers don't meet in secret, but their upgrades land on the same map like they did. Inland ports, dry intermodal yards far from tidewater, sprout storm-rated roofs and side-loading doors that accept modular barricades. Bid specs call for door frames that can take add-on blast plates, roof diaphragms built to shrug off hurricane gusts where hurricanes don't go, floor slabs fibered for abnormal point loads. Public language says sustainability and resilience. Internal notes mention standoff and ingress control hardware available. Available means boxed, barcode, waiting. What vanishes tells the rest. Hospital buyers find long shelf life antibiotics perpetually backordered. Warehouse managers at cold chain firms mention federal sweeps that clear racks in a day. Seed inventories, upland, drought-tolerant lines, get absorbed by research consortia with security clauses. The purchase codes route through agencies that don't farm. Phone trees go friendly and blank. Telecom hides in plain sight. Redundant fiber reroutes inland, shadowing ridgebacks. Microwave relays pop along high ground to clear line-of-sight paths that mirror rail. Tower techs show off racks with EMP-hardened enclosures and laugh that storms won't knock these out. They mean thunder. The spec means space weather and grid slaps. The map layer never gets mentioned. The hardware keeps arriving. Freight schedules, insurance corridors, and telecom backbones accidentally share the same ridgelines, three industries aligning without a memo. Staffing shifts carry the moral math on their backs. Mission Essential becomes a checkbox that triggers extra screenings and inoculation bundles. Criteria don't post, but the pattern repeats. Water plants, trauma centers, rail control rooms, inland logistics hubs. A manager says they were told to profile for continuity fitness, endurance, cross-trainability, low med dependency. He shrugs. If the freeway closes, I need folks who can sleep on a cot and run a forklift at 3 a.m. Public vocabulary keeps the room calm. Grid reliability. Supply chain modernization. Resilience hubs. The internal slide decks use the other nouns. Population flow management, gate discipline, node integrity. A city near a junction updates zoning to facilitate population flow, then asks where the people are coming from. The answer doesn't land on paper. A contractor in the High Plains pours a communications substructure under a logistics park. The rebar schedule is dense, wall ties continuous. The spec calls for sacrificial cable trays designed to rip and replace after a surge. He asks if it's a storm shelter. The site lead points to the ridge and says one word: corridor. The humor drains out of the day. Seed banks replicate quietly away from Svalbard's cameras. AG Labs establish upland field stations with redundant cryo units and vehicle traps at perimeters. Press releases talk drought and rust resistance. Shipping manifests show duplicate accessions moving inland. A geneticist gives the practical reason. Use site where the grid recovers first and the road stays open. That's corridor logic without the metaphysics. Transit agencies rehearse inverse plays. Coastal regions refine evacuation time curves and stage last bus drills. Inland jurisdictions work on ingress smoothing, metered entry, credential scanning, staging lots. Drafts carry activated thresholds in the footer. They're provisional until they aren't. A health system orders badge printers that encode triage priority and movement permissions. A rail operator buys handhelds that unlock gates for mission fit. A county installs turnstiles that default closed on power loss. All legal, all directional. Inside continuity circles, veterans argue for open corridors and posted criteria. Newer hires answer with throughput math and incident timelines. The argument isn't theater, it's doctrine in wet concrete. Meanwhile, orthodox indicators keep humming. WMM updated early in 2019, then again refined into WMM 2025. Insurers withdraw from coastal zip codes. Storm season stress transformers that were never meant to swallow geomagnetically induced currents. Budgets don't need prophecy. They need cover. The viewer's graphite lines don't appear on a blueprint. They echo across 100 decisions. Which siding to lengthen, which slab to thicken, which hill gets fiber, which badge opens a gate when the grid blinks. The corridor accretes. Once it exists, flow denial stops being a phrase and becomes a lever. The hardware works either way, open wide or hold tight. Doctrine decides which default wins when the timer starts.